We're back on CBS Mornings, 7:30, ahead of tonight's State of the Union address, which only occurs at the formal invitation of our next guest. We are very pleased to have the Speaker of the House, Republican Mike Johnson of Louisiana, with us. It'll be his first State of the Union as Speaker. Mr. Speaker, good morning. Thank you very much for being here. So are you ready for tens of millions of Americans to be staring at your face over Joe Biden's shoulder tonight?
I don't know, Tony. You do it every morning. How's it work out? We're ready for it.
You're going to keep your face on straight. Okay. Yes. I want to talk about something in the news right now, things that will probably come up in the speech as well. Abortion IVF. Alabama just passed some legislation to protect IVF. I know you said you support IVF. But there's this question of embryos. In the process, they are destroyed, disposed of. If you believe life begins at conception, fertilization, and I know you do you see that as murder?
It's something that we've got to grapple with. You know, it's a brave new world. IVF's only been invented, I think, in the early 70s. But there's an estimated 8 million Americans who have been born because of that great technology. So we support the sanctity of life, of course, and we support IVF and the full access to it. We know lots of families, friends of ours, who have beautiful families because of that. Alabama, I think, has a good example of that because they've gone to legislate now to try to protect that and to make sure that there's ethical handling of those things. In some states, like in Louisiana, there's a limit on the number of embryos that can be created because they're sensitive to that issue. But it's something that every state has to wrestle with, and I think Alabama's done a good job of hitting it head on early on.
But they haven't resolved this key question, though. I mean, if life begins at fertilization, an embryo is fertilization, people, practitioners, hospitals, until you clear them from the disposal process, if you are saying that's a child, and in fact, if you dispose of that child, it's a death, they're uncomfortable with that. Can you clarify that point directly?
I think policymakers have to determine how to handle that. We need to look at the ethics surrounding that issue, but it's an important one, and it's some of these issues and some of these questions are unprecedented, and so it takes a lot of thoughtful debate and careful consideration. But we do believe in the sanctity of life, and if you do believe that life begins at conception, it's a really important question to wrestle with. It's not one Congress has dealt with, and it won't be. I think it's a state's issue, and states will have to be handling that.
You don't want to say where you are on it personally?
I think I have said. I mean, I believe in the sanctity of life, every life, and I think it's something we have to very carefully consider.
All right, let's talk about immigration. It's a big issue. Republicans have done a really amazing political job of putting it at the center of the conversation. But we're at a moment right now where it would appear that just nothing is going to get done until a new administration comes in, and they look to you and wonder, where's the leadership? What do you say to that?
Well, the House has been leading, and it's not House Republicans that have put that to the forefront. It's the American people. It's the number one issue in the country because every state is a border state now. It is a catastrophe, a humanitarian catastrophe, a national security catastrophe, and it was done by design. President Biden and his administration took at least 64 specific executive and agency actions to open the border wide. They put the welcome mat out. He said it in his campaign before he was elected president, and they've done it. He and Secretary Mayorkas. We passed legislation 10 months ago, H.R. 2, which is now famous, that the House sent over. It would have fixed the asylum problem, the parole problem, reinstated Remain in Mexico, which is the big thing, and ended catch and release. The Biden administration is releasing into our communities dangerous criminals. And now the white ribbons, what we're wearing today, is in honor of the Angel families. They're American citizens, American families. We're losing family members to brutal murders and violence because illegal aliens are being allowed out into the streets. They're doing that.
What Joe Biden has done and has not done is what he'll have to answer for. He'll talk about it tonight. We're going to talk to a representative of the administration later in the show. But I do want to talk about not blame, but what your game is here in all of this, what you can do. H.R. 2, I'm familiar with it. There are aspects of the Senate bill that was negotiated that do largely what parts of H.R. 2 do. For example, Mr. Speaker, raise the standard for applying to asylum. And right now, this moment, based on the average crossings, the processing that the system's doing, the president right now, if that bill were law, would have the power to shut the border down with no executive action.
The president has the authority to shut the border down right now.
He's not taking it because he doesn't think he can get cooperation from Mexico. But
he's not taking it because for a while he argued that he didn't have it. But he and I have had this conversation. I read him the statute. It's Section 212F of the Immigration and Nationality Act. He has full authority to close that border completely right now, but he won't do it. And there are 7 or 8 other executive authority actions that he has in statute that he could use, but he won't. And that is so perplexing to us. I've told him myself, I don't understand why you wouldn't do it. Why wouldn't you stop the humanitarian crisis? There's a political purpose to this, I think. Well, and that's what the American people, that's the conclusion they've drawn.
Well, that's a good point to bring up here, because people are asking, why won't you do it with the powers you have? And I think that question comes around to Donald Trump, who has said, if this bill doesn't get passed, if immigration doesn't get addressed, blame me. That's a quote of his. How often do you when's the last time you talked to Donald Trump about this issue?
I talk to the former president frequently. I believe he'll be the next president. I'm delighted that we have now completed that process, and you're going to have a rematch of Trump versus Biden. And I think when you look at the two men and their policies and what they were able to achieve, I think it's night and day. I mean, the State of the Union right now, sadly, is in decline because of the Biden administration, the decline of our national sovereignty with that open border, our safety on the streets of every community in America, the decline of our economy. You know, the average American household is having to spend $11,400 more annually just to cover their basic needs. And we have a 17.9% inflation rate overall. I mean, everything about it, our stature on the world stage. I mean, this president is projecting weakness on the world stage when President Trump projected strength. And we remember from the Reagan years that we maintained peace through strength. We're doing the opposite right now, and it's dangerous.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that idea of peace through strength is a good transition to talking about foreign policy, America in the world. Ukraine is losing ground to Russia right now, according to the CIA director, and aid for Ukraine is on hold because you don't want to put a deal on the floor until there's border security. And you've got Evan Gershkovich's parents. He's an imprisoned Wall Street Journal reporter in the gallery tonight, a guest of yours. What do you say to them about holding money back from the folks fighting Vladimir Putin?
No one in America wants Vladimir Putin to succeed. He must be stopped, and we need all of our European allies and everyone in NATO to lend a hand, and they have been. But what I've told the president is what the American people demand and deserve. That we have to take care of our priorities first, and we have to take care of securing our own border. If you don't have a border, you don't have sovereignty, you don't have security. So we're actively looking at the options on all of that, on the supplemental that you hear so much about, the supplemental funding. But it's the president who linked the issues. The president sent over months ago his national security supplemental package. It had Ukraine, Israel, the Indo-Pacific, and it had border attached to it. So that's how this conversation began. The president himself started it. We have to finish it the right way. We have to take care of America's needs first, and I do not think that's a controversial notion.
Well, we hope it doesn't come back to bite us. I want to talk about decorum. You and I here are having a conversation. The conversation in Congress has not been so polite lately. Speeches, the State of the Union address in recent years has included heckling, boos, accusations of lying. There was the torn-up speech famously. This is your chamber. It's happening at your invitation. What's your message to members about how to behave?
I've been very clear about this. We've been trying to turn the temperature down here. I do think we need to get back to decorum and respect the institution, and I've been trying to model that myself. When Pelosi ripped the speech, it was actually a felony. It's a violation of statute, and I wrote a long legal memo about that nobody wanted to see. So I won't be tearing the speech up today.
Okay.
But I've talked to our team, the Republicans, and I think Hakeem Jeffries is talking to the Democrats as well, that we want to maintain decorum. There's going to be a lot that we disagree with. I'll probably disagree with almost everything President Biden says tonight. But we have to respect this institution and respect the people and have an honest dialogue about how to move forward. And I think we can in the days ahead.
All right. Mike Johnson of Shreveport, Louisiana. You wanted to be the chief of your local fire department?
Did.
Following your dad's footsteps. Instead, you're Speaker of the House. We wish you luck tonight. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom.